Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Kokas. I'm with Kitsap Economic Development Alliance and Washington PTAC. It's our honor today to introduce Sandra Davis. She is one of our clients and always willing to give her knowledge to others. So Sandra, please take it away with you and your team from EcoResource Group.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. As Kathy said, I am Sandra Davis, and I am the principal in EcoResource Group, also our managing member. And with me today are Seth Young. Seth participates in research and marketing within the company, and also Catherine Heller, who is our human resources support person. And
Aloha.
I was just going to say, Catherine is calling in from Hawaii this morning, so it's pretty early there, and but she has lots of good information to contribute. So we're happy to have her. So reporting requirements with our GSA contracts are really multifaceted, and once you get the contract, it's only the beginning. I heard someone say the other day that it's like you got your ticket to the dance, and now you've have your ticket, you're going to go, and there's lots to be done, lots of people to meet, lots of new steps to learn. So we are happy to be here to talk with you about this. Before we get started, Seth, next slide, please. I'd like to find out who is in the room. And the presentation today is going to be collaborative, but to help us in helping you, we'd like to know if there's anything specific that you'd like to learn about managing your GSA contract, and if there's any questions that you have that you'd like us to address as we're talking with you this morning. So let's see who's here. Who'd like to go first? Terry, is that you?
Sure, I'll go first. So this part 2 session is on reporting requirements. Although familiar with helping companies start getting into and competing for a GSA schedule or contract, and now I want to participate and learn about all the reporting requirements after they successfully get a GSA schedule.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Who'd like to go next?
Well, I can go next.
Thanks,
So I just, one of the things about the requirement, and I actually need to read more about it. We didn't have any orders. I had gotten this notice from GSA Advantage that you have to report your order status. And it's a, excuse me, it's where's my stuff? And it seems like it's something new. And because I didn't have anything, it was the first quarter of the new fiscal year, I didn't have anything going out. I didn't really look into it. Did a couple e-mods. I was really busy with e-mods in the fall, adding new products. And so I got really sucked into that and doing some price increases. But this is something it's something new, and if you guys have any information on it, or I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And Juanita, could you tell us just a little bit about your business? What kind of products do you sell?
So we actually sell fitness equipment.
Okay.
And on the GSA, we manufacture we started with our company Black Iron Strength, and that's what we own. That's the company that we own, and that is on the GSA, and we got on the GSA, it'll be 2 years in this past December. And then as we went to a show in the summer, and then a couple other fitness equipments approached us. And so we added one, and we're in the process of adding another one. We're very like-minded, very high quality products, customer service oriented. Those are the products that, they came to us, and it's been a good synergy, a good match.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anyone else want to introduce themselves? Have we had anyone else join, Kathy?
No.
Right. Well, just to say a little something about Eco Resource Group. We have been on GSA schedule. We're in our 9th year now. We've been in business for 24 years, and we don't sell products. What we do is we sell professional services. So there are some similarities and there are some differences between how the services work and how the products work. And yet much of the information is applicable to both. So as we move on, and specifically, Juanita, I do not know about the report order status, but that is certainly something that we could find out about for you.
That would be awesome. I have actually ran a couple things off, and actually I just got our first order, but that's going to go out pretty quick. But it is interesting, and rightfully so. I understand why this is happening with the whole COVID, because our orders have been delayed. I mean, the majority of our product is made with steel, and there's huge delays with that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, okay. Well, we'll get back to you. It could just be just a request to find out what is the status and when do you anticipate, right? So whoever it is, who's your contracting officer for that order or your buyer for that order, perhaps just circling back with them and asking, you know, what it is they'd like besides just an update, if there's a certain form or something like that.
Exactly.
Question.
Go ahead, Terry.
So is there still a minimum requirement, annual requirement of $25,000 in sales to stay on schedule?
There is, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about that, just a couple slides. All right, Seth, do you want to move us ahead then? So, so you've been approved, and this is going to be going back a little bit, Juanita, because you've already been on schedule for a couple of years. But what we wanted to let people know is that there isn't very much that the government knows about you, even though you've been approved and you now have a GSA contract. So you have your company catalog that has been posted via SIP, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So you have an approved price list. You have labor categories or products that have been approved. You have approved rates. The terms of your contract have been worked through. You might have a discount, you might not. You may have a fast pay discount that you've provided as well. And you either provided products that have been specifically approved, or you're going to have to do an EMOD later, or you've provided a couple of jobs that have shown the government that you have experience in the areas for which you're asking to have a GSA contract. And one of the things not on here, but you also have special item numbers that you've been approved under with you have a service contract. Next slide, Seth. Other way, please. Okay. So you may not have a track record with the buyer yet, or the agency that you want to sell to, or you might. Like in our case, we had done work for some of the agencies that since we've been on schedule, we've been able to expand upon that work. And what we've actually done is provided them with another contracting vehicle to be able to work with us. And since you have those pre-approved rates or pre-approved prices, you're able to do business easily, and you don't have to go through, most of the time, you don't have to go through a lengthy request for proposal process. That has the intensity of that or the detail of that is generally dependent upon the work or the size of your order, of course, and there are thresholds within the government as to whether or not they can just do a buy, an outright buy, like under $10,000. You can just purchase with a credit card. Then there is, since COVID, a $250,000 limit where the government just needs to look at a few different contracts, decide which one provides the best advantage to the government. And then over that, or where there is a scope of work that is a performance work statement that's required, we could have a more lengthy process for projects over $500,000. As Terry was asking just a minute ago, there is a requirement that you have to have a minimum purchase of $25,000 within the first 24 months to be able to keep your GSA contract. And then every 12 months thereafter, you have to also have $25,000 in sales. And what we're talking about is the federal fiscal year as opposed to the calendar year. The other thing that comes into play with this is because of COVID, there was a relaxation of these requirements. And what I've heard lately is that we are back on track and the $25,000 in sales is back to being a requirement. So if you have any questions, I would reach out to your contracting officer and see if there is a way, if you've not been able to reach that minimum, there is a way that you can have your contract extended, but that seems to depend contracting officer by contracting officer, even though there are guidelines that kind of underpin that. But people have written letters and they have been extended for an additional year. Other people have had conversations and not had to go through a lengthy process. So definitely reach out.
Sandra, I have a question. Sorry, is there a raise your hand button? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're absolutely fine. Interrupt away.
All right. Well, my question is, so the 25,000, I thought it was from my contract anniversary to my contract end. So from December 23rd to December 22nd, I thought that's when I had to get the 25 grand.
You know, Juanita, I was just about to correct myself.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you're
No.
absolutely correct.
There are so many nuances, and I've tried to soak as many of them in this past 2 years. I was like, I missed that one. So, okay.
No, we actually had contracts. We had several contracts that began on October 1st and then ended on September 30th under our GSA contract. So for us, we were always looking at the federal fiscal year.
That's awesome. That would be a cool way to be able to do it.
Yeah, it worked well, but it was different than our contract year.
So it is the contract for my contract anniversary.
It is your contract anniversary, correct?
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what you just said about the nuances of this contract, I think really the essence of this presentation is we get on contract and, you know, generally you have a contract and then you fulfill the terms of the contract and you just move ahead and that's what you do. With the GSA is always changing, it seems. So the nuance of it and all the things that we need to learn, kind of stealing the thunder here of the whole presentation, but that's really what it's about is, you know, how do you stay on top of that? And
absolutely.
What are the things that come up?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for clarifying, Sandra. Thank you.
And thank you for asking. Okay, Seth, next slide, please. So in order to achieve that 25,000, we're actually going to talk about that a bit. We look at who is the ideal client. Do you know who your ideal client is at this point in time? Or are you doing research in order to identify who that is? And for you, Juanita, did you come into your GSA contract knowing who it was you wanted to sell to? Or have you had to do research?
You know, we've had to do research and kind of, sort of. I mean, we knew that it would be the Department of Defense. because we had had inquiries about our fitness equipment, and it fits well with especially like special ops and those types of units. And my husband is actually retired military. He was special ops when he was in the military. So that was that fit. But it's just, so that was where we first started. And then we pursued, because my husband's service disabled, we pursued that. And so slowly just, we keep just knocking at the door and, trying to figure out, just because you think it's going to be the right fit and fall in your lap right away, it doesn't happen that way.
It's lots of hard work.
Yes, it is. It is.
So when we look at, our GSA contract, there's so many different agencies or bureaus that buy, and there's so much money on the table. I was on a webinar the other day, and they were talking about, how many billions are there and it's available, and just go out, get your contract, and you're going to be a happy camper. It's going to change your life. Well, not exactly. You really need to do the targeted marketing and develop the relationships in order to find your ideal buyer. And who are the people within the agency that or what geographic region, might there be a specific geographic region that would be most interested, or a specific agency or bureau, like in your case, DOD, Veteran Affairs might be another one that would be, worth looking at, or even the Army Corps of Engineers. I know several Corps offices that actually have gyms within them.
That totally makes sense. And that's a door I've knocked on, but I will tell you, they'll go, no, we don't do it. The Corps of Engineers. And it's interesting because after I just spoke, I thought, and I saw the Corps of Engineers emblem, and I thought, that was one I thought, but I just have not had success with that group. Veterans Affairs, I'm actually getting a little bit of traction through a relationship. A gentleman that I've met, a fellow person on the GSA, and he's kind of helped me with Veteran Affairs. But so it is interesting. Just because you think it'll fit, not always.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit in a moment about some of the people that you might reach out to, not specifically the buyers, but within the organizations who might be able to help. And then another question that comes up is, are you the prime, or do you want to be a subcontractor on a larger project, or in this case, a larger purchase? Or might there be an opportunity, such as with the gentleman who you met who's been helpful with Veteran Affairs, to do a joint venture or partnership for a specific opportunity? One of the things that we've noticed over time is that the contracts themselves, or the requirements that are coming out, is a better word for it, so in the case of products, it would be purchase orders. In the case of services, it would still be purchase orders, just for something different. But within that context, we're seeing that the requirements are calling for larger and larger projects. And within that, we may not have all of the skill sets anymore that would have enabled us to fulfill the requirements. So we're needing to do more partnering and needing to do more subcontracting, where before we were a prime contractor most of the time. So with the changes in GSA, it may also require changes in how it is we're selling our services and the relationships that we develop even outside of the government. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? Okay. Seth, next slide, please. So another way to get clients is to attend various events that happen in our area throughout the year. And one of the things that we have some regional forums. There's one in Kitsap that happens. There's another one in King County that happens. There's Alliance Northwest that occurs down in Puyallup, and where you have lots of government buyers or agency representatives. You also have a number of consultants and vendors who support people like us to help us sell our services to the government. Another one is a SAMI conference that happens in Bremerton, where you have government buyers that you can meet, and sometimes even contracting officers. Another place to look are the small business liaisons for the different agencies that you want to provide services to, or to the OSBUs. And both of those people, they can't provide you with specific contract information for the most part, but what they can do is to help you find people within the organization who can help you, since they have access to those folks and we may not know who they are. Also conferences, small business conferences, as well as professional associations. Lots of times there's different meet and greets that we can show up at. And I've actually ended up with a couple of contracts through meet and greets, then association meetings. And sometimes even being on a conference committee can introduce you to people that otherwise you wouldn't have any access to, or you might have trouble getting in the door to see them. So go to where your buyers are and just show up and be fully who you are, and see what occurs as a result of that. And it's a great way to kind of augment your marketing strategy. Seth, next slide. And I believe this one is yours.
Yes. So a bit about online research. The first thing is that there's just an incredible wealth of information now that's online that can help guide marketing efforts. And there are a number of tools that the government itself has published that allow you to kind of parse what's out there. So we've just listed off a few of our favorites here. BidMatch, which you may already be using. You can sign up through the PTAC. Kathy can help you. That produces a customized daily alert of federal opportunities, and then you can click through and read the details on SAM. GSA eBuy also has email alerts for upcoming opportunities that match your special item numbers. We've begun to dip into trying to do better forecasting for ourselves, and that involves working with the Federal Procurement Data System data, which you can access through SAM or through a website called USA Spending. And that just allows you to see basically all the money that the government is spending, and you can slice and dice it any way you like. You can check on your competitors. You can see what agencies have awarded money in your region recently, so on. Agency budgets, strategic plans are published. They are a wealth of information for the kinds of priorities that agencies are pursuing in the coming fiscal years. And we've been able to identify some trends that have been helpful for ourselves by reading through those budgets. Of course, as Sandra mentioned, the contracting officers at the agencies that you're interested in are good contacts, especially when they're putting out requests for information. Basically they're sort of assessing the field of businesses out there that might provide a service. And we've also put LinkedIn in here. Increasingly, government employees are visible to us outside the organization through LinkedIn. So it can be a helpful way to sort of get to know some of the people that you may be corresponding with, have a better understanding of their history, how they're linked together. And of course, there are a ton of third-party services out there that that also work with this government data and package it in various ways and sell it. or at least provide access through their special portal. So, depending on what your needs are and what you're selling, some of these tools could be more or less useful. For professional services, I would say that having a good grip on what your competitors doing and what your target agencies are publishing as priorities for the coming year has been really helpful. For products, I imagine it's not too different. Yeah, good. Any questions?
Okay,
Great.
thank you. One of the things I've been noticing lately is that there have been more and more groups coming forward saying that they can help you identify your target, who your ideal buyer is, and that they can help you get that business, or they can help you to manage your contract so that you don't have to, and they can make the contact with the buyer. At 1 year, when we were relatively new to being on schedule, we actually engaged with the company like that. And what we found was that they were able to do some initial research and identify some things, but the follow through and the ability to really help us with identifying specific opportunities was limited. And as we became more aware of what the requirements were with the contract, that we were in a much better position to do that ourselves, because we really understood who we were, what we were about, and what it was that we could offer the government. So depending upon your business, that may or may not be a good option. And I would just say buyer beware, and make sure that you get some really good references before you go in that direction. Next slide, please. So the next several slides are about, okay, there's things that you need to know or to do. And I think several things that as we came into this GSA space, we weren't necessarily aware of. We just thought we could take our contract and go and find work and get purchase orders under it, and that was it. Well, not the case. So the first thing you need to do is you get a letter, and within the letter it says that you have all of these different requirements and things that you need to do. You need to upload your catalog. That is one of the first things. So within your catalog, you basically have your offer as well as your pricing, and that gets posted via a special program called SIP on the GSA e-library. And what that does is that enables all of the government buyers out there to actually see your information. And then there are mass modifications that come out. In fact, I just got a new one this morning that will have new terms and conditions or changes to your contract itself. And these are initiated by GSA. They are, some of them are applicable to all buyers. Some of the changes are just applicable to certain special item numbers. It all depends on what the mass mod is. But they are things that we need to review, need to understand how it is that they impact our contract or the way in which we do business. And then from that place, accept them. There's also new federal requirements that come out so you need to stay abreast of those as well. Most recently, based on the pandemic, there were some changes having to do with contractors and masks or vaccines that were needed or those types of things. And they were things that we had to understand what the implications were for our company and make decisions as to whether or not that worked for us, and then respond appropriately. There may also be changes to your catalog that are needed. based upon GSA updates. We also had one of those that happened last year where we had to revise our catalog and then repost it via SIP. And sometimes that's easier to do than others. We're noticing that changes are going on. In fact, it's hard to not notice that changes are going on in GSA, and they've been, pretty wide, far-reaching. And within that, GSA is changing their program. They're trying to modernize, make things better. And as we all know, in the process of change is not necessarily simple and straightforward. It can be messy. So we are needing to both become apprised of as well as adapt to those changes. So each step along the way, as a company, you really need to ask yourself, does it make sense to be on schedule? And there is a business side to that as well. I guess it's all business, but there's a business side to that in terms of just how much time and energy it takes to manage a contract. And as you see, I brought 3 of us here today, and we each have a role in making sure that we're staying abreast of requirements that we need to follow under our GSA schedule, as well as be able to find the opportunities that allow us to stay on schedule, all the while doing the work that we love, or selling the products that we're proud of and that we want to have other people use and get to know the value of. So SBA is also undergoing some changes or within this last period of time. And you may have noticed, if you're a woman-owned business, that there's no more self-certification for being a woman-owned small business, that now you actually have to go through a certification process. And there's several options available to do that, but SBA ultimately is the group that approves that. Next slide, Seth. So other things to know, really, I think I've already said this, but you really need somebody who's paying attention to your GSA contract, monitoring requirements, and then determining how to integrate those into the way you do business. And some of the ways in which we need to change could impact the way your processes work, the way you do different things, the way you buy from suppliers, the way you work with your contractors or your subcontractors. And then there's also, and Juanita, you mentioned this earlier, that you've been doing eMods to add additional products. And what we found is that the client-led, or when we lead a modification, that necessarily isn't a simple process either, that you need to show what your pricing has been, you need to substantiate that. If you want to add labor categories, you need to show where you've used those labor categories before. Sometimes we want to change our rates or our pricing, and that also requires a modification. Or if you decide down the road that you want to change your contract terms, that becomes another conversation. Juanita, can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been with the modification process?
Actually, it's been a very positive experience. It actually, I did 1, 2, 3, 4 eMods. I did my first one in June, and that took me a little bit longer. I added more SKUs of our product line. And that took me a little bit. That was the first one, but I had my contracting officer was great, and she, did my research, went back to her with questions, and we went back and forth, and she was very helpful and got through it. I mean, and then I'm more and more confident, I have to say, I'm more and more confident now with doing it.
Fantastic. That's great. And anything that, throughout that process of working with your contracting officer, were there some lessons learned there that will make the next one easier?
One thing I learned, our contracting officer, who has been very responsive, she actually went on medical leave right as I was starting the first one, and I had someone else come in, and it was just adjusting to the little nuances, and both were great. The little nuances of how they like it done, and just it's nothing more than we do in business. It's just learning how to work with different people and different personalities and just different nuances of what they expect. And also, I'm really, my PTAC, Jeanette, has just been wonderful, and she gave me a tip early on about letting them know how much we appreciate them helping us. I mean, it's not a one-way street. And so I actually, with both these people, the interim contracting officer as well as our regular, is I actually wrote letters to their supervisor and thanked them and let them know how helpful they were to getting through that EMOD, and both of them were extremely appreciative. So I think it's just like, for me, it's like, I definitely had to learn, they're not the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, but they're actually real people, and to treat them accordingly.
Yes. Thank you. That's really helpful. And we've also been very fortunate with our contracting officers as well as our contract specialist over the years in terms of, really being willing to work with us or to answer questions or provide us, mainly they provide us with information, and our business is a little bit different. And then it's that process, as you're talking about, of really refining that and asking questions to be able to get the answers you need to be able to complete the task.
Exactly.
Yeah. And thanking them, remembering that they are real people. And that goes for all of our marketing efforts too, right? That everybody who we reach out to is a real person. And if we approach them and work with them in that way, I always find that the relationship is much stronger, and there grows out of it this mutual respect, so that people actually know who you are, as opposed to just being somebody who continues to bug them.
Exactly, and expecting from them, but not giving back to them.
Yes. Yeah, I have this story about we had to do a really quick turnaround on something, and I had this meeting that was scheduled, and this woman had just gotten her daughter had taken a medication, and she was having a reaction to it. And she was like, "Oh, I really need to be here for the meeting." And it's like, no, you really need to,
Exactly.
Right? We can talk later. And then I followed up in a couple of days and asked how her daughter was doing. And it was the beginning of a long-standing relationship.
Exactly. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important, probably more important than everything that we're talking about, except, well, yeah. And then there's the requirements, right, of our contracts.
Right.
So thank you. All right.
Oh,
Seth,
sure.
next slide, please. So one of the other things that we need to know and remember all the time is that we can charge no client any less than we can for what has been approved on our GSA contract. So if we have escalation clauses or something like that within the contract, we need to be really mindful of that. In our case, we're going to be going in for a mod to stop our escalation, because I feel like we're starting to our rates are starting to get too high. And that makes us not be as competitive as we once were. So within the government space, we can always provide a discount, but we can't offer that same discount outside of our GSA contract. So we need to be mindful of the pricing that we put forward. But should you have an assessment, one of the first things that they're going to ask you are to show them proof that you have been charging others at least as much as what you're providing in your government bids. And then they're also going to ask you, in the case of services, for people who is working on your projects. And those people, you need to make sure that their minimum requirements are met, but within what it is you've designated in your labor categories. And for products, it would be the price that you are offering your product at, what's on your price schedule, and making sure that you aren't providing those products in the general marketplace at a lower price. Next slide, Seth. So there are also annual updates that you need to make in SAM to make sure that SAM is up to date. And your SAM reporting is sometimes based upon your earnings by purchase order. So it could be that you've met the minimum threshold and you're going to get a notification from your contracting officer letting you know that you need to go into SAM to report your earnings. Could also be that you've had a subcontractor on a project and that subcontractor has exceeded the minimum. And within that context, that you need to report what it is that you've paid to them as well. There's a reporting of quarterly earnings that need to be provided to GSA, and there's an IFF fee of 0.75% that gets paid on those purchase orders. And there's also assessments or reviews. So the assessment I was talking about earlier, where your pricing would be looked at and your labor categories would be looked at, that can happen on an annual basis. And then there also is the potential for audits. And there is a whole group within the government that is just focused on auditing various contracts. And that can happen that kind of request can happen at any time. Next slide. So we're going to kind of shift to, at a company level, some of the things that need to be done or that you need to be aware of. And I'm going to turn this over to Catherine for this part of the presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. Started to talk without unmuting. Okay, so it's critical that you drill into your GSA contract terms and conditions to determine, what you need to activate in your company's infrastructure and operations to make sure you're, complying and in compliance for those requirements. There's always been this Office of Policy Management that has oversight over all federal contractors, that they have always been underfunded. And so there hasn't been a whole lot of checking to make sure you're really fulfilling or prepared, or you have the right policies, or you right procedures. And they are now completely funded and are going to be creating compliance and requiring it and inspecting and acting in ways that they haven't for many years. So it's kind of alert to everyone, like, what, dust it all off, make sure it's up to date. So, one of the big ones is ensuring that your recruitment, hiring, and performance management processes fulfill the American Disabilities Act and the Affirmative Action policy, as well as, of course, Department of Labor requirements. The need to have actually an affirmative action plan and document, like on site, is really depends on your company size and the threshold of your dollar awards that you have in total. Let's see, and then there's actually different like executive orders or agency effects as well. But it'll be spelled out, or at least it'll be referred to that you have to be in compliance to this or that in your contract. And then you would need to drill in a little further to make sure, like what is the minimum, because all of us don't need to spend our time that we would love to be doing our service or providing our product, making up documents and elaborate plans that we don't need to do. So it's important to drill into that. Okay, next slide, please. Something that has to happen right away is that you have to be able to use EVerify, which is the way that the government, they're really adamant now about, legally eligible employment. And, as they're trying to protect job rights from illegal immigrants and whatever. Anyway, it's been a hot topic for years, as we've all probably noticed. And this EVerify is about verifying that you have, that you're legally, your employees and all of you are legally eligible to work in the United States. And so it's the I-9 thing in the documents that are required for that. It's quite an ordeal to get the account set up and then to have an employer representative or user qualified. There's self-testing program is several hours for reading it and answering and doing all of that. And there's some decisions about how you want the company to be seen by EVerify that affect the timing and the depth to which you have to verify employees. Generally, what you would choose, and the minimum is that anyone that's going to be working on one of your contract projects, you've gotten the award, all existing employees who are assigned to that must be verified within 30 days of the signing of the award. Any new hires that you hire for the project have to be verified within 3 days of hire. And it's they've been allowing some space and some opportunity for not having to personally examine the documents that are proving eligibility because of the COVID situation. That keeps moving around. They were allowing it to be digitally offered during the pandemic, and then they had ending dates, and that keeps moving as everything else does with COVID. So anyway, they're real mandate. They were very particular about how things are done, and then these could be alerts to violating your contract if you're not doing it. So, any questions on that? Next slide, then, please. Okay, I think this one is yours, Seth.
Yeah, we've just added a general note here. There's been some rules that were begun, their rollout began, and then they were retracted somewhat. I think but we're hoping people take away is that depending on the agency and the nature of the work, there will be cybersecurity requirements, and it's our guess that this will just become more and more a standard requirement for all kinds of business with the government in the future, as digitization becomes more and more part of the GSA's infrastructure and how work gets done. So it's definitely something that you'll want to explore depending on the kind of work and agency that you're targeting.
And I have heard that GSA is moving forward with this in some way, albeit somewhat revised from, and Terry, you probably have more information about this even than I do. Initially, there were many different levels for cybersecurity, and now it looks like it's down to perhaps 3.
Yeah, as a public comment from when DoD first started this initiative 2 years ago, as a result of public comment, their DoD is now proposing changes to CMMC, but that those changes have to go through at least 3 different iterations, and they can take anywhere from 9 to 24 months before they're actually approved. Although the accreditation body is already implementing them, I think that's premature on their part because, for example, the Department of Homeland Security IT, head of their IT, has already voiced concerns and disapproval of some of those changes. And to me, I think we should just be waiting. We should be using the initial CMMC requirements until these DoD proposed changes go into effect. But the accreditation body is already working on the changes. So as you've mentioned, the changes, the initial CMMC was 5 different levels, level 1 through 5, 5 being the most stringent. Level 1 is basic cybersecurity. The proposed changes is changing it from 5 to 3. So levels 1 and 2 are now level 1, and the previous level 3 is now level 2, and 4 and 5 is now level 3.
Okay.
The requirements are going to still be the same. It's NIST SP 800-171A, regardless. That's still the tool to prepare to get your cybersecurity system audited and get a certification that's still going to be good for 3 years.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So other things at a company level that could get impacted are your accounting system and making sure that you're in compliance with what's required under your GSA contract. And then also, as Kathy said, a lot of your human resource types of issues, you need to pay attention to those in perhaps a different way, but not that, I guess there's new requirements like the EVerify, though many companies already use similar processes to make sure that all of their employees meet federal or regular employment security requirements. Is that the right term, Kathy? You can tell I'm not the HR person.
Yes, that is right. And one example of, like the way that the Fed's mandating something, they've changed the minimum wage for employees that are on a contract. As of the end of this month, it'll be $15 an hour. And so if your state and local whatever level of pay requirements is below that, you'll have to, adapt up to that. I just always check those minimums and make sure that we're covering that. Otherwise, it doesn't, in that case, then there's nothing for us to do. But and it's interesting. The president can do things, and then there's all these different agencies that regulate employment can, mandate things. So
Thank you. So Seth, next slide, please. So we thought we'd discuss some lessons learned as we were preparing the presentation. We kept saying, well, yeah, we learned this, or yes, we learned that we weren't prepared for. So we thought we would share that with you so that as you're working your way through your contract, you have some greater insight and you have your eyes wide open and can reach out for support or assistance if you need it. So the first thing for us, and Catherine and Seth, please chime in, and others as well, if there's experience you've had with some of this or other lessons learned that you'd like to add, we'd love to hear them. For us, the first one was the level of effort required to manage our contract. We just, we didn't think about that when we applied for it. And then the volume of information from GSA that we receive and that we need to understand and that we need to act upon. It's not like something can come in and you can ignore it or be too busy to not have time for it. It's something that you always have to be keeping an eye out for. So also staying abreast of changes that are happening within the government that could end up affecting your contract, and then needing to adapt within your organization in order to meet those things. And then a really positive thing is that if you find a good client and they really love you, being on contract, being on schedule can be really rewarding and can bring you quite a lot of work that you wouldn't have had access to other ways. And the GSA schedule makes it easy for people to be able to do business with you. So as I began, it was like having your GSA contract is the ticket to the dance, and now you get to dance. So any questions? Anyone want to add something to what it is I've said about lessons or anything else for that matter?
So I will add, this is Catherine, that, or just emphasize how many notification emails, that come in. And I just, you just have to be willing to read the directions, you have to have the tolerance to read through it, because some of them actually have something you have to act on. And so just sympathy to everyone else who gets them as well.
Great. Next slide. So other resources that can be helpful to you. I've been talking about our GSA contracting officers and contracting specialists and how they can help us not only with EMOD, but when we have questions that come up regarding our contract. PTAC, Kathy, Mary Jo, Terry are wonderful resources for us in terms of when we have questions or need support or assistance. PTAC contracting hour can be really helpful, in particular talking about contracts and talking about opportunities that are coming up, or having a contracting officer who's participating that within a different context, you learn different types of information, or special trainings such as this one, or the one that Terry mentioned earlier in this session. There's also what's called mass office hours, and that stands for the multiple award schedule. And there are actually contracting office hours offered by GSA where they talk about the FAR and they talk about how the mass schedule actually works. There's also MRAS, that stands for Market Research as a Service. And there is a new program, not sure exactly how new, but I want to say within the last year, that has taken RFIs to a new level. And what they do is the MRAS folks process requests for information on behalf of different government agencies. So they'll go out and ask you to respond, and they have a special form that you respond by, and that can help the owner or the buyer want to, in determining who's out there who can respond to their request for proposal when they put it out. So many acronyms, right? But within that, they have been trying to streamline RFIs for some of the agencies, and we're seeing more and more of them lately. There's also other government-led trainings. Sometimes the individual agencies will have a training where they will speak specifically how to do business with them and who are the best resources to reach out to. Sometimes I have even attended ones where they talk about their projects that are upcoming for the next year, and who those people are who are going to be the project managers. So that provides you with another opportunity to reach out to someone. And then the SBDC also does training. So I'm looking at, and the SBA website is another place where you can get additional support and information. And then there are a number of third-party vendors and different networking opportunities. Most of those will have a spin to them. Usually the person hosting that is wanting to sell some type of service, but the information contained within it can just be wonderful, and it can give you that one tidbit of information that you've been looking for. So it can be worth your while for the right sessions. And does anyone else have any additional resources that you'd like to suggest that we've missed talking about that could be helpful to people who have a GSA contract? Mary Jo, are you trying to say something? I saw your light go on. Mary Jo, could you be muted? Okay. Perhaps not. Kathy or Terry, anything you'd like to add?
This was great. Lots of good info.
Good. Glad you think it was helpful. Terry?
Yeah, nothing to add.
Okay.
Well, going back to the beginning, like your fourth or fifth slide, I think it was Seth that presented it. Different sources. So one that I want to comment on, two of them. One of them is to find another way to find past procurements. You did identify FPDS in SAM and GSA spending. Another one is acquisition.gov. It will do the same thing too. It's just another source of finding all the contracts that have been awarded from all federal agencies. And that's free information for everybody. The other comment on that slide was contacting the soliciting contracting officer. And you did mention that your advocate for any contractor working with a federal agency is the agency's small business specialist. Yes. They are the agencies, they are your advocate, the go-between between you, the company, and the procuring office of the agency is the agency's small business specialist. The Federal Acquisition Regulation requires every federal agency to have small business specialists, and their whole purpose in life is helping small businesses. They can't help the large businesses, they can't help the nonprofits, they can only help small businesses. And that is your conduit to that agency is communicating or finding out who it is and communicating with them, the small business specialist. Different agencies give them different titles. They can be deputy for small business specialist, different name, but they all do the same thing. So just want to put that out there.
And Sherry, is the easiest way to find those people on the agency org charts?
It can be difficult finding them. So I attend a number of classes, webinars every month, and for the different agencies, DoD or the military agencies within the Department of Defense, like the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, Marine Corps, FEMA, Department of Energy. Whenever I get an opportunity to find a connection for that department or agency and their small business specialists, I'm building a list of small business specialists for all the various agencies. And anytime that I have a client that is interested in a particular agency or whatnot, I give them that contact, because that is your advocate to that agency. And if there is a meeting of the minds between you and that agency small business specialist, then that's when you provide your capability statement to them so they can put it on file and communicate with their procurement office, whether that's contract specialists or contracting officers or buying agents with the purchase card, whatnot. That small business specialist is the one that can say, yeah, here's a company that sells exercise equipment, and pass that capability statement on to them. And that's how you get the connection. That's how you get to work with the agency.
Terry reminded me, last year's Alliance Northwest was held online. And so we had access to everyone who was speaking, their contact information. And there were the regular sessions and that type of thing, but the website was left up all year. So we could actually go back and use that and find people who were those small business specialists for the agencies. And there was actually a woman who I began communicating with via that, that platform, but then it went beyond that, and we had 2 or 3 follow-up meetings after the conference, just talking about what they needed and how we could fill that. And she got our capability statement and all those things.
Yeah, Alliance Northwest is March 10th this year, and it's going to be virtual again, same as last year.
Great.
And it will be the classes and the webinars and whatnot are going to be available for the following 12 months, just like they were last year. And I believe registration is now open. I think it just became available this week so any companies in Washington can go to washingtonptac.org and register to attend Alliance Northwest. Do I have that right, Kathy Kokas?
Repeat that.
The registration for Alliance Northwest is now open.
Yes, yes, it is.
And it's going to be virtual again, and the training and the classes and speakers will be available just like last year for the following 12
Yes,
months.
because it's on the same app as last year.
You know, sometimes that just brought up something else, like with the Alliance Northwest and that group of people, there were, you know, many hundreds of people who were on that site or who were registered that you could reach out to. And even with coming up with my priority list of people to reach and to engage with, it was hard to keep up with it because there were so many potential options.
Yeah, I learned this week that there was 600 people in attendance last year, and our goal this year is 1,000.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I guess we better get ready. We better start gearing up.
It's the once a year opportunity for companies to connect with agencies of all levels. It's federal, state, county, cities, universities, school districts. All the agency levels are going to attend this once a year event. And then you got the prime contractors, which can be large or small businesses. They're there. Vendors are there also. And then we got speakers that come in and talk about different subjects. I'm lining up the Department of Labor West Coast Director for the what is it? The Longshore and Harbor Workers Compensation Act, which a lot of companies don't know about. But if you are working around navigable waterways, you need to have special insurance. Otherwise, if there's a claim against you, you can go bankrupt. So coordinating, bringing in the Department of Labor speaker for that. And there are lots of speakers all day long.
Thank you. Mary Jo, I'm seeing you show up a little bit different than you have been. So is there something that you wanted to say? Okay.
I see she's muted right now.
Yeah, I see that too. You know, she was going around in circles there for a while as she was trying to get in. Juanita, are there any questions that you have or anything that would specifically be helpful to you besides seeing if we can get some more information on that report order status request that you got?
Not that I can think of. This has been very helpful, and thank you so much for your time.
Our pleasure. And on behalf of the ECO team, so as we can go to the end, thank you. It's our pleasure, all three of us, to be here with you today. And any questions, please reach out and we'll do whatever we can to help.
Thank you so much. And I will be letting folks know this is available on our YouTube channel when I get it uploaded. So
Okay.
Thanks to you and your team today for some great info.
Thank you. Have a wonderful
Thank
day,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, son.
Aloha.
Thanks.